I think we are live.
Yeah.
We are. Fantastic. Give everybody a second to get on board and get online. It's very early. Well, it's early here in the UK. It's 10 a.m. where you are, right, Sophia?
10 a.m.
Perfect. And then hopefully we will have a global audience of humans hailing from all over our network. So yeah, I will give everybody 1 minute to jump into the stream. It is only just 9 a.m. here now.
Yep.
Fabulous. Good morning, all. Welcome, welcome. So you can see our gorgeous designed layout from the excellent Giacomo from our Italian office. Shout out to Giacomo if you're here already. Cool. So let's jump in, because I think even if people turn up a little bit late, it won't matter too much, because we've got a little bit of a setup up front anyway, but we have tons to get through already. So I'm going to jump straight into it. Oh yeah, we've got a ton of people we've got Poland, Italy, Stockholm.
Wow.
Nice. Hi guys. So yeah, welcome. And just so you know, Australia as well, and some from the UK, of course. So yeah, we will be taking questions at the end. There is a ton to get through, but we should have enough time for 10 minutes of questions. So chuck everything in the comment box and we will be getting to you towards the end of the session. So let's start off. I am Laura Oxford. I'm Global Head of Cultural Insights here at We Are Social, where I work across all 13 of our offices, I believe it is, to ensure that we are tracking local culture and laddering all of that back up to global digital culture and the real kind of macro shifts that we're seeing happening in there. So that's me, Sofia. Take it away.
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Sofia Sarcina from We Are Social Italy, and I'm part of the media and distribution team as an influence marketing specialist. So I'm involved in all the campaigns that include content creators, media partners, and yeah, I was helping Laura with the research we're about to tell you, and I hope you will enjoy it.
Yes, we've had a big collaborative job on this. Once again, for those of you who missed it at the beginning, shout out to Giacomo, without whom the deck would not look so beautiful. So yeah, and our amazing layout as well. So let's jump in. So for those of you who missed our last episode from the Game On gaming series, this is the latest addition to our kind of wide range of public-facing research and thought leadership, in which we collaborate across our network of over 900 social and digital professionals to really stay on the front foot of what's happening in digital culture and ultimately what the future of digital marketing will look like. But with a ton of pioneering global brands from all over the world to support them in embedding themselves not just in gaming but in wider industries as well. Everyone from Netflix to Instagram to the IOC to Bumble and more. And so the reason we want to talk about gaming is that we've seen it's really been rising in recent years in terms of people kind of overtly and explicitly talking about their love of gaming, whether that's mobile, consoles or PC gaming and everything in between. And currently, according to our most recent survey data, which came out at the end of Q2, over 85% of global internet users say that they game. And for younger generations in particular, it is so ubiquitous that it's almost not a thing we need to call out anymore. There's this amazing quote from a high snobiety research paper which came out recently saying, calling someone a gamer today would be like calling a boomer a TV watcher. It is just so normal and so common, it's almost ridiculous to call it out. It's a platform for engaging with some of the world's biggest stars. We've seen increasingly that it's a platform for learning about important issues around climate change and social justice. And it's a platform for supporting our fellow human beings, whether that be during Black History Month, during Pride Month, and on our everyday kind of ongoing upskilling and learning about the world around us. And so that's why we decided to create Game On, because even though this platform is hugely ubiquitous, even we know that it's really common, there are still so many aspects of it which are a mystery. So in this series, we've been exploring the biggest cultural and commercial opportunities within live streaming, which was last time, and Alice will be sending the deck around at the end of this for that one as well. Esport, which is what we're going to focus on today. And then next time we'll also be talking about in-game integration, everything from in-game items to in-game events, characters, avatars, and so on. So let's jump into esports, and we've got tons to cover today. Firstly, just a quick shout out again to our network who contributed to this and made it happen. And then also to some of our collaborators from beyond the network who have really helped us bring it to life with their expertise. So we had Dan Ringland, who we spoke to, who's the head of Valorant Esports at Riot Games. We spoke to TL Taylor, who we also spoke to in our last episode around live streaming. She's a sociologist and author of Raising the Stakes, which is a whole book about esports and about the kind of human behavior that underpins it. And then our very own Fabien Gaetan, who is our head of gaming and social entertainment at We Are Social France. So he's responsible for some of the biggest partnerships that we've facilitated between esports team Vitality in France and Renault. So, as I mentioned, we're covering a lot. So just want to set up front what you're going to get out of today. So first off, we're going to be just paying a little bit of attention to the cultural context about why you should actually be paying to esports right now and the wider cultural climate. Then we're going to debunk some of the biggest myths and stereotypes around who actually follows esports. It's one of the most well-storied kind of communities in the digital space, but actually there are a ton of stereotypes which we're going to debunk today. Then we're going to look at the kind of core experiences that define esports fandom. So here we're going to introduce a framework that really highlights the people and organizations that brands need to know about if they're going to authentically participate in the esports ecosystem. And then finally, throughout that ecosystem, we're going to be exploring some of the biggest opportunities and really decoding gaming culture to make it easy to understand where we can participate in meaningful ways. That's what we're going to be covering today. So just to jump straight in, what do we mean when we say esports? Really going back to basics here. So it's an event where a multiplayer video game is played competitively for spectators and typically by professional gamers. But while that term is incredibly broad, and the industry itself is actually very fragmented as well. So what we'll be doing today is focusing on the games, the leagues, and the communities that have been drawing the most attention on the global stage. And without being too cynical, the thing that ties all of these things together is the money. So as Fabien says here, the thing that's bringing esports into the fore right now is the cash. The money people are making across the esports world is making wider stakeholders and our brands pay attention. This is about the teams that are making the most money, the leagues, the games, and where essentially the biggest commercial opportunities are for our brands. So that's what we'll be focusing on for today. The areas of the esports industry where they're the biggest financial gains for our brands. Because esports is big, it's really massive. Last year alone, it made $947 million on the global stage. And drew 496 million global viewers. All of these numbers are numbers which are growing. So last year we saw an 11% increase in viewers and 15% increase in profits and revenue. So we're really seeing this kind of continued growth, which is continuing even after the pandemic has ended, and potentially, maybe people are spending less time behind their screens and more time out in the offline world. And it's a growth that's giving traditional sports a run for their money. So we can see here that both Major League Baseball and the NBA have less collective viewers in the US than esports does, with the NFL being the only one which is kind of really overtaking esports at this point. And to really kind of illustrate this is my favorite stat, which I have always brought up since I started doing the research for this. In 2019, the League of Legends World Championship Finals drew 100 million unique viewers globally. So that's 2 million more than the Super Bowl that year. So it really kind of hammers home the scale and the opportunity that, that these kind of leagues have. And it's a shift that's been catalyzed by a year of cancelled offline events. We saw NASCAR take all of its races online to iRacing, with the first race alone drawing almost 1 million viewers. And in 2020, we also saw footballers being forced to go head-to-head on FIFA instead of in the field at a time when the stadiums were shut. So we've really seen this shift being catalyzed by the events of the last year. And while all of this has been going on, we've actually been seeing that Gen Z are simultaneously falling out of love with traditional sports. So this is a bit of a mouthful, but bear with me. Gen Zers are half as likely as millennials to watch live sports, and they're twice as likely to never watch them at all. So what we're really seeing is this drop off. And while that's happening, we're seeing that their fandom for esports, so 35% identify as esports fans, is actually overtaking the portion of this generation who would claim to be fans of the MLB, NASCAR, or NHL. So we're seeing this real shift in gears here, where esports and virtual sports are really kind of moving into the fore, while traditional sports are maybe kind of losing some of that love. But the cultural significance of esports does transcend sport alone. Like, it's really easy to make a ton of comparisons just to the world of sports, but actually there are tons more spaces where we're seeing esports move out of sport altogether and out of competition altogether and just move into wider culture. We're seeing that esports stars have become legitimate celebrities with high-profile endorsements and partnerships, whether it's the team 100 Thieves, who recently partnered with Gucci on a limited line of backpacks in this incredibly beautiful, like, high-octane ad, or Fortnite pro Valkyrie, who is on the far right, has confirmed recently that she'll be starring in the next music video from TikTok star Bella Poarch. So we're seeing this real kind of meeting of worlds where gaming and wider culture is really starting to overlap for esports stars. We're seeing simultaneously that esports titles are championing famous fans from wider culture. So I don't know if any of you saw it, but amazing trailer for season 3 of Call of Duty recently, which featured Saweetie, AJ Tracy, Young Thug, and a ton of other musicians and rappers who are from beyond what you would consider the kind of traditional gaming space. And then meanwhile, I'm sure many of you would have seen the huge number of collaborations that Fortnite does with all of its famous fans, you know, everyone from DJ Marshmello to Travis Scott and a ton of other people in between, creating in-game content, in-game programming, and really kind of, you know, championing these kind of figureheads beyond the kind of conventional gaming remit. And then lastly, we're also seeing that esports communities are redirecting their clout and cash for global impact. So we're also seeing, aside from the developers and the stars themselves, that the actual communities of fans are organizing themselves in order to kind of make an impact in wider culture. 2 recent and really exciting examples of this are the Minecraft Championship for Pride 2021, which happened earlier this year and raised over $300,000 US for the Trevor Project, which supports youth trans issues. And then No One Left Behind is a really exciting 9-week esports festival, which is a collaboration with gaming audience Gamers Without Borders and UNICEF. And it's intended to raise over $10 million US for vaccine distribution. So again, really incredible initiatives which are feeding into really important global issues. And so in this landscape, there are more opportunities for brands beyond the gaming space than ever, and beyond the sports space, to really step in and do something really exciting and participate in a meaningful way. But in 2019, over half of all esports revenue came from sponsorships. So what we're really seeing here is that the main kind of way that brands are currently participating in this space is through badging. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. Like pictured here on the right, we have a still from the League of Legends Championships final, which MasterCard sponsored. And this was an incredible theatrical masterpiece that couldn't have happened without MasterCard's input. You know, it involved live K-pop performances, it involved like 100-foot high holograms. Highly recommend that you look it up afterwards. Sadly, videos do not work on these conferences as it stands. But you know, these really amazing experiences that couldn't happen without investors like MasterCard. So sponsorship is one way in, and it's a really legitimate one. But there's so much more than badging that brands can do to resonate with fans and truly create cultural impact. And so that's what we're going to be exploring today in further detail, surfacing what we consider to be the biggest opportunities for brands in and beyond the gaming space to participate in the esports ecosystem in more meaningful ways. And so again, as I mentioned, we're going to be taking you through a really exciting framework that really breaks everything down, makes it super simple, and gives you a bit of a 101 on the cultural impact that you can have. So that is what is coming up today. And again, for those of you that are joining a little bit late, please don't forget to ask questions because we will be addressing some of them at the end. So first off, before we get in, we are just going to do a little bit of a myth bust around who actually follows esports, because the typical esports fan is shrouded in myths and stereotypes. There are tons and tons of myths which are attached to these fans which aren't necessarily true. So we're just going to take you through some of these to kind of maybe shake up your understanding of who the typical esports fan really is. So first off, the pop cultural representation suggests that esports fans are diehard obsessive. So whether it's, I mean, we've got an excellent representation here from The Simpsons, but you can see it storied in tons of different aspects of popular culture. South Park is another classic as well. There's this real suggestion that esports fans are really, really, really obsessed. It's all they think about. It's all they do, to the point where, you know, potentially they're not eating or they're not sleeping. But actually, the data suggests that the majority of fans are actually casual viewers. 55% of fans watch esports less than once a month. And in particular, last year, what we saw was that esports was kind of suggested to be something which is really filling the programming void. Something that's really important to bear in mind here is that a lot of esports tournaments are very long. So League of Legends tournaments, for example, can last up to 5 hours. So this isn't something where you'll necessarily sit down for a short, sharp hit of like really exciting viewing. This is something that you might have on in the background. You might have it on in the same way you'd have like a podcast or the radio or the telly. And so, yeah, what we're really seeing is that a lot of esports fans are actually casual viewers, or, you know, just over half. Next myth. The numbers suggest that esports fans are mostly male. So you can see here, if you Google esports, esports teams, esports players, esports fans, 9 times out of 10, you'll get something that looks a little bit like this. So very male, maybe a couple of women in here, but generally a very male-dominated space, right? And surveys suggest that just 22% of esports fans globally are female. But again, the data here also suggests that the figures we have access to are inaccurate. And I think this one's really, really pertinent in the current cultural climate as well. 59% of women hide gender to avoid harassment while gaming online. And we have an incredible quote from C.L. Taylor here, which really kind of hammers this home. It's less stigmatized in Europe and North America than ever for women and girls to game. But there's still so much policing and harassment that women are often hidden. They're often isolated. And this poses huge challenges. It essentially makes female gamers invisible. So what this really means is that even though currently the numbers suggest that just under a quarter of gamers are female and esports fans are female, what is really, really likely is that it is much higher than that. A lot of people just aren't publicly identifying, and we can't always trust the data that these platforms have. So that's the second reality. And then third, media narratives imply esports is dominated by the young. So here we've got a picture of Jaden Ashman, who won over $1 million in a Fortnite tournament at the age of 15. And tons of the headline and media narratives that you'll see around here talk about, you know, teenagers and Gen Zers being the ones which are really kind of making big in esports. And to an extent, this is true. It is a young person's game. Gen Zers are picking up esports. But actually, the typical esports fan in North America is 31. And if you look at someone like Ninja, for example, Ninja is also 30. So actually, the millennial audience here is a really, really big one when thinking about esports, especially because some of the kind of heartland of esports started, you know, once it started to go into the mainstream, when Ninja was blowing up, was when millennials were still on the throne of the kind of next generation of youthfulness. So I think it is worth noting here that, yeah, yes, it is a young person's game, but they're probably a little bit older than you might. But the too long didn't read here isn't that there's one or the other. Really, it's about the fact that there is no typical esports fan. And this is really replicated in a lot of the research that we did across all of our interviews. But this great quote from Fabian here, which basically culminates in saying the industry is extremely fragmented. The developers of the games and the communities that play them have a really active role in defining what's going on. And given that there are so many different demographics and psychographics of people playing games, the industry itself is very, very fragmented. And so what our ecosystem is hopefully going to help you explore is the universal fan experiences that define esports, regardless of what kind of fan you are, whether you're, whatever game you play, whatever your demographics are. These are the touch points and the experiences that you will have regardless. And so for this, I'm going to hand over to Sofia.
Thank you, Laura. So, to better understand esports, we must take a step back and think about the whole gaming scenario, because esports is a part of it, but not all gaming is esports. So here we can see our first approach to this phenomenon, namely the amateur competitive gaming, that is all about online tournaments, Discord servers, or LAN party. And then we have the professional competitive gaming that even though from this graph could seem a small part of gaming, actually it has changed from a niche movement to a global phenomenon. And as Fabienne said, esports is a very fragmented economy and there are so many stakeholders. But today we will go through them. We will see publishers, league and tournaments, teams, and players. Obviously, we will also mention the role and the opportunities for brands who want to invest in this ecosystem, and we will point out investors who want to esports grow to increase their return on investment. But let's start with the publishers. So they create the games that are often fans' entry points. But what is their role? The publisher plays two major roles in esports. Firstly, they make and they publish the games. Secondly, they can run their own competitions, while others license their games out to third parties, such as league organizers, streaming platforms, esports teams, or brands. Here we can see some of the most popular game publisher at the moment, and without them esports couldn't exist, because they own the game's intellectual property rights, and for these reasons they are the most powerful and the most relevant players in this field. They make a wide range of games which span different genres, different kinds of gameplays. Here we can see some MOBAs such as League of Legends from Riot or Dota 2 by Valve, some FPSs like Call of Duty or Rainbow Six Siege. But as we have said, in the next slide, we can see that publishers generate revenue through license fees. Here we have some examples of partnership between publishers and third parties, such as broadcasting platforms. Here we have a multi-year deal between Activision, Blizzard, and Google that includes YouTube as the exclusive digital platform to host Call of Duty League, Overwatch League, and Hearthstone Esports. But publishers can also collaborate with league organizers, giving them the exclusivity to host an event. But in short, what we have said, we will say that a publisher can give the exclusivity rights to a digital platform, such as YouTube or Twitch, but they can also give the exclusivity rights to a specific channel, and usually is the league organizer one. Lastly, we can see a partnership with a brand. Here we have an example of a multi-year exclusive product licensing agreement between Riot Games and Logitech. But turning to fans, though, the publishers are less important than the games they create. In fact, for most, playing those games is the entry point to esports fandom. Until now, 74% of people who follow League of Legends tournaments also play it, and 71% of fans only watch one game. But from our interview with TL Taylor, we understood that this trend is changing. And being that esports is becoming a global phenomenon, the potential radical change is that people are starting to watch things that they are not playing, as it happens with traditional sports. Oh, you're on mute, Lo.
That's classic, isn't it? That's what I get for trying to be conscientious. So we can see that there are tons of different ways that that brands can kind of participate from a tech perspective. Certainly that Logitech partnership with Riot Games that Sofia just mentioned. But where are the opportunities beyond tech brands and gaming brands to really partner with publishers in credible ways? So the first opportunity kind of leans into what we alluded to at the beginning, which is that the line between esports and traditional sports is blurring. As Fabian mentioned here, especially after a year of live events organised by the gaming industry, we're seeing a mix of traditional sports with gaming aspects. It's not really esports, but it's not traditional sports either. And there's no more timely example for us to kind of bring up here than the Olympics virtual series. So in tandem with the Olympics 2020 in Tokyo, what we're seeing is that the Olympics has launched a virtual series in which the IOC partnered with 5 different developers to create online leagues of baseball, cycling, rowing, sailing, and motorsports. So these were 5 online leagues which were sponsored by the IOC that essentially took this kind of very storied offline tradition and translated it into the online space. And so what this really creates is an opportunity for brands to future-proof themselves by legitimizing esports in offline spaces. We've been seeing for a really, really long time, beyond the Olympics example, that things like numerous traditional football teams across Europe have launched their own official esports teams as well. So here we have a great example of the AC Milan team in FIFA in their virtual forms. And this is creating opportunities for brands to kind of give esports the same treatment that they would usually give traditional sports. An amazing example of this is what Nike did with Riot Games for the League of Legends 2020 championships, in which they actually created a League of Legends Air Jordan. This kind of partnership is something which has previously been exclusive to sports like basketball. And so in doing this, Nike has not only legitimized League of Legends as a sport, but it's also future-proofed itself and kind of broadened its scope into a wider audience. So that's the first opportunity here when it comes to partnering with publishers. The second one, which I find even more exciting, is all around the growth of mobile esports, because they are some of the fastest growing in the category. We can see here on the right, Garena Free Fire is one of the most live streamed games across platforms right now. And it's all via mobile. And last year they had one of their first tournaments, which was the Free Fire Continental Series 2020. And it drew 1.5 million live viewers globally. So even for a mobile game, we're seeing these huge numbers and such growth in such a short amount of time. And it's presenting really exciting opportunities from an audience perspective. You can see here we have a quote from Nick Contino, who's a business development at Rio Games, which is a mobile developer, saying any game you play on your phone, including casual games like solitaire, can be made into a mobile esport. In the next few years, we'll also see more non-gaming influencers begin to stream and promote them. And since the mobile demographic is largely female, influencers in that market have an unrealized opportunity to partner with up-and-coming brands. So what this really presents is an opportunity for brands to work with mobile publishers to appeal to a broader gaming audience, and by extension, a more casual one. Really great example of where we're seeing this playing out in culture is the fact that Pokemon Go has become an esports, is becoming an esport. So it's very niche at the moment, but it's a growing community of competitive players, which has been kind of bubbling up ever since the player versus player mode was introduced in 2018. But this really kind of creates an opportunity for, nostalgic franchises and more casual franchises like Pokemon to really kind of move into the fore, which would potentially open esports out to a much broader audience. And we're seeing that some of the brand partnerships beyond gaming and sports that we're seeing here are already really thriving. So Honor of Kings is another mobile game. It's massive in China, and it's the APAC equivalent of one here, which I think is called Arena of Valor. Don't know if anyone's into mobile esports, but if so, you might have heard of it. So it's got an all-female cast, and MAC Cosmetics created a lipstick line inspired by the 5 female leads, and it sold out in less than 24 hours. So again, this really, really kind of impressive and exciting space where we get an opportunity to see how brands can participate in this category beyond the kind of expected remit.
Yes, turning to league and tournaments, they provide the core viewing experience. In the next slide, we can see that they are competition that esports teams and stars participate in with a specific goal, for example, winning a champion title or prize money. And here we inserted some of the most watched esports tournaments as of May 21. And first places, there is the Garena Free Fire World Series. As Laura said, Free Fire is one of the most popular mobile esports games at now. And this this league is followed by League of Legends World Championship. But for this section, we wanted to start with a provocation. So all esport leagues are tournaments, but not all esport tournaments are leagues. And actually, the main difference is about the length. In fact, leagues are usually played over several months, and they follow a planned schedule, whereas a tournament typically happens over a short period of time. And as we've said, publishers can run their own competitions. Here we have some example as the LCS by Riot Games, Overwatch League by Activision Blizzard, and more. But the interesting thing is that publishers can give in the next slide, we can see that they can give the property rights to external leagues, such as ESL, that is one of the most popular here. And they organize ESL 1, Intel Extreme Masters, and more competitions. Then we inserted the Star Ladder, that is more focused on games like StarCraft 2, PUBG, or CSGO. And finally, we inserted Faceit, that is more focused on online tournaments. But as Tayal Taylor said, even though until now we talked only about games, publishers, or league organizer, behind esports there is a ton of people who want to create a great bond with the community. In fact, in the next slide, we can see some of the most important touch points by which fans experience esports. Firstly, we can see in real life events that includes tournaments, LAN parties, festivals, or trade fairs. And those events are broadcasted in live streaming platforms such as YouTube or Twitch. And finally, we inserted another in real life space, namely in sport bars, where they are organized amateur tournaments or viewing party for the most important competitions. But brands can participate in tournaments and leagues too. Here we have some example. Here we can see MasterCard, that was the main sponsor of LOL World Championship, and they decide to sponsor the most popular, the most followed event during this competition, mainly the opening ceremony, and they did a very great concert performed in augmented reality. Or a brand can also create its own league, here as Intel did with Intel Extreme Masters. Or here we inserted some lighter collaboration, such as Secret Lab, that is the official chair partner of LCS and League of Legends Worlds.
Nice. Checking that I'm not on mute this time. So yeah, as Sophia's just mentioned, there are tons of again really exciting ways in which brands are participating in these spaces, but through badging and sponsorship. But again, there are some really exciting kind of builds on those, which can really help brands gain credibility within the gaming space. So the first opportunity that we have here is a really interesting cultural tension that TL really highlighted for us. In that esports may have huge amounts of money behind it, especially given what we're focusing on today, but it's built on grassroots communities who value authenticity over fame. So TL says it's important for folks to understand that the relationship esports has with grassroots movements is integral and it's a knife edge. Fans are knowing participants in this commodified system, but authenticity is key. And there's probably not a better example of this anywhere than GameStop and GameStop's unique relationship with the gaming community, especially given everything that had with Wall Street Bets and the stock market earlier this year. But GameStop has partnered with esports organization Complexity to launch an esports performance center. So this is a space where teams and players can go to practice for leagues and tournaments, but it's also this incredible space for fans to come together to meet their heroes sometimes, but also to hang out and to kind of bask in their shared fandom. So it's a really great example of how a brand is really kind of creating space for these communities. And that's really where the opportunity is, creating spaces where communities, grassroots communities, can flourish. And it's something which is already so much more commonplace anyway. Gaming just has so much more room and space in the offline world than it did maybe 5-10 years ago. One of the most exciting developments in this space has to be the fact that Fortnite is now officially a high school and college sport in the US. So it's a competitive national league which was launched by a startup called Play Versus last year, which now means that Fortnite is an official kind of varsity sport, which is a wild turn of events. And there are other brands who are also starting to kind of participate in those spaces already. So in the UK, Levi's has actually partnered with Newell, which is the University Esports League here in the UK, to fund youth tournaments, incubate the next generation of esports talent, and really give grassroots communities, again, a kind of a space and the support they need to kind of continue their shared passion. So that's the first opportunity within the leagues and tournament space. And the second one is a really, really exciting opportunity, which was highlighted by Fabian, which is all around how, in a culture driven by competition, fans are increasingly seeking experiences built on more than just winning. So Fabian says that one of the most toxic elements of the esports community is actually the competitiveness that comes into it. So now more than ever, there's like this real pushback that we're seeing where people are looking for smaller esports events that are more fun, they're more about entertainment, and they're all about good values. And so one of the biggest examples of this in France is Z Event, which is a French multi-game esports event where pros and amateurs alike play nostalgic and off-trend games. So this is about playing old franchises that people love and have kind of real emotional ties to, but, you know, moving beyond the League of Legends, the Overwatches, the Garena Free Fires, and all of those really kind of trending games that currently have like the most viewership, which therefore makes them the most exciting to play online. And so the opportunity here is a really, really fun one, which is to invest in joyful esports events beyond the major competitions. And some of these events already exist. One of my favorites through doing this research has to be Overwatch League's May Gala Cosplay Showcase. So this is an annual cosplay event which is run by the publisher of the Overwatch League and the organisers of the Overwatch League. But it's just for cosplayers and popular cosplayers from around the world to come together to celebrate the outfits and the characters in Overwatch and kind of let the competition take a back seat. Another way we're seeing this play out is through an event that Toyota recently did with Genji, which is a South Korean gaming organization. So Toyota put together almost a kind of a variety show of sorts. It's a 10-day virtual race that features a variety of esports stars from many different teams who play many different games in this very kind of entertainment-centric live stream, which still has some aspects of esports attached to it. There still is a competition and a prize, but it's much more playful. A lot of the gamers are less specialized because they're all playing a driving game, despite the fact that a lot of them don't necessarily play driving games. And it's all about the fun and the money raised from watching and so on. So great example from Toyota there.
And yes, turning to teams, they create a sense of camaraderie among fans. For this reason, we acknowledge teams as a real brand with values, a specific positioning, a particular tone of voice. And here we have some of the most popular ones that simply marry sports and competition with entertainment and culture. But after analyzing them, we can say that they differ in many aspects as brands, but also as community. In fact, comparing to teams like FaZe Clan and Team Liquid, on one hand, FaZe Clan appears as the most followed team with a powerful lifestyle brand that prioritizes content and with so many popular investors such as LeBron James, Offset. And on the other hand, we have Team Liquid that they are all focused on success and they are the longest standing team with the highest overall earning in the world, and they are foremost followed by the old school esports fans. But turning to teams, the main difference between traditional sports and esports is that esports teams don't just play one game. In fact, they monitor players through scouting, or they seek for the new games to invest on or for their available leagues. And they also have multiple sub-teams that play multiple games. Here we have some recent news items that say that, for example, TSM recently signed a new Wild Rift roster, or Fnatic just announced a new CSGO Academy team. And as Fabian said, playing across multiple titles is what enables teams like Fnatic to become super brands. They have many licenses to express themselves, to perform, and to flex their brand in a wide range of contexts to appeal to a wide range of community, of course. But a team is made up of more than a player. In fact, as it happens with the traditional sports, here we can see some coaches that are the closest to the players, or analysts that are expert on analyze team gameplay. And we also have team presidents, and more often we also have team esports psychologists, as the stress level of players could be very massive. But how do these teams, or rather those brands, express themselves? So we can distinguish teams that are more lifestyle brands and teams that focus on performance. So the former are brands that transcend esport alone and enter to pop culture, approaching fields like music, fashion, and entertainment. The latter are brands who focus on performance. They introduce themselves as the very best in terms of winning experience in esports. And for this reason, we can say, as we can see in the next slide, that lifestyle brands are focused on aesthetics, values, and storytelling, whereas performance brands are more into their knowledge, their achievement, and the game fields they are active on. But there are a ton of different reasons people might support a team. It might depend by geography, as there are so many global teams as Team Liquid, but there are also competitions like Overwatch League that have city-based teams. Here we have the example of the Houston Outlaws that leverage on people nationalism. Or people might decide to root for a team for their values or their aesthetics. Here we can see an example of a partnership between Fnatic and Gucci that is a partnership that transcends esports in itself. And lastly, someone else could decide to follow a team because a certain player plays for them. For this reason, so many teams, besides the esports rosters, have a network of streamers to attract people and to create a bond with the team. And to conclude this part, we inserted some of the most active project categories in this field, and we have so many endemic brands as HyperX, File Series, and Logitech, but also so many brands from automotive, apparel, food and beverage field are investing on esports teams.
Nice. So again, yeah, looking where the opportunities are for brands to collaborate with teams in meaningful ways that kind of elevate above that that badging and sponsorship opportunity. So the first opportunity in this space, esports fans are constantly engaging with teams, even when they're not watching streams. So, you know, whether that's in subreddits, whether it's on Discord servers, whether that's just via kind of, you know, conventional like Twitter or Instagram or whatever channels. Fans don't switch off when the tournaments end and when the live stream isn't streaming. They are always on. And an amazing stat which really kind of hammers this home. So FaZe Clan, which is one of the biggest teams that we mentioned earlier, they made $40 million US dollars in revenue in 2020, and 80% of that came from its content division. So not from its esports division. Its roster includes not just esports players, but creators who are responsible for always-on content. These are athletes, social media stars, people that really kind of embody their lifestyle brand and their values, but don't necessarily game. And they will create commentary around moments as well. And so what this really creates is an opportunity to treat collaborations with teams like media partnerships rather than kind of one-off influencer deals. Really amazing example of a kind of cultural moment within this space, which creates like a really always on set of amplification with it, is the 100 Thieves jersey launch from last year. So it launched a set of 3 jerseys for the different sub-teams playing different games last year. And the lookbook that that featured these jerseys was created by a famous photographer. It was styled by a famous stylist. It featured athletes and creators from beyond esports. And so the amplification of that moment long outlived the actual drop itself. It's a really, really amazing example of how many different kind of moments there are within esports beyond the tournaments themselves to really kind of lean in and create content around. And arguably, there's no better example of this than Adidas's collaboration with G2. So G2 is another really, really established team in this space, and Adidas actually did an interview recently with their marketing teams, talking about the fact that the whole deal was locked in by their entertainment division rather than their usual sports marketing team, who would look after, say, athlete partnerships and so on. So we're really, really seeing here that the collaborations we can have in esports are much more kind of long-lasting and always on. The second opportunity is kind of alludes to what Sofia mentioned with the rise of the team psychologist. So amid rising awareness of burnout in esports, teams are looking to kind of actively create healthier environments within which players can thrive. So Bjergsen, who is pictured on the right, has talked very vocally about has talked a lot and been very vocal about the kind of prevalence of burnout in the industry. He says here, as a veteran player, it's about making the mental improvements I need to continue to stay on top. There was a time when I was sacrificing sleep, sacrificing everything to put in more hours. You don't know the effects of it until you hit rock bottom. So his is just one in a number of stories of players that really had kind of let it get on top of them. And he's actually retired from being a player now after speaking publicly about this. And now he coaches where he creates safe space for younger players to not kind of experience the same thing that he experienced. And so within this space, there is an opportunity for brands to support teams in both increasing awareness and driving action. So of the latter of those two things, we can see in the bottom left here, we have a partnership between Team Liquid, who Sofia mentioned earlier, and Alienware. So Alienware funded a training facility for Team Liquid in which players would be provided with the camaraderie, the support, and the guidance they need outside of their bedrooms to ensure that they're really doing what they can to kind of stay healthy and stay sane when they're practicing for leagues and tournaments. And this particular facility has led to a number of others popping up in similar suit. And then secondly, with regard to raising awareness, Cloud9, which is another team, recently collaborated with Kaiser Permanente, which is a healthcare brand, to launch the Presence of Mind series, which is a content series normalizing discussions around mental health, featuring a ton of different people from the esports space. So really, really interesting and exciting opportunity there as well.
And yeah, in conclusion, having a glimpse on esports players, they are who the fans connect with, and then we can see the most popular players or who have won very high prizes. It's impressive how a common player can become an esports star, earning so much money. Indeed, in the next slide, we can see that a single player can earn more than $3 million per season, like Buga did in 2019, whereas there are the International 11, namely Dota 2, a Dota 2 league, that this year will have a prize pool of over than $40 million, with the contestant potentially pocketing several $1 million each. And by comparison, the Super Bowl winners make about $150,000. So more different. And here we want to mention that esports player signings are highly rewarded, immensely hyped, like the biggest football transfers. Here we have one of the most important transfers in his esports history, namely when Reckless decided to, after 8 years, he decided to leave Fnatic to join G2. And but this is only one of so many different moves that players can make in the industry. In fact, esports players can be dropped, as we can see in the Cloud9 example, or they can swap roles with a teammate, or they can sign or join to a new team. And to conclude this part, how fans engage with them. So basically, some people want to learn, so they follow esports players like Faker, as they are hungry to learn new game strategies, or they could be interested in a specific fandom, so they follow players that are beloved for their deep enjoyment for a specific game, as Ninja do with Fortnite. Or someone else could follow a player just to be entertained and to have an enjoyable conversation during streaming. Or to conclude, someone else could want to connect to like-minded others, and they choose players that are beloved for who they are and for being a source of connection, such as Sonic Fox.
Nice. Which leads us into our final set of opportunities for brands to build credible relationships with players in meaningful ways. So the first opportunity here lies in a very kind of prevalent wider cultural narrative here around the fact that despite connecting a very rich network of communities, diverse esports stars really kind of lack visibility in this space. So Teal says that the fighting games community in particular, so those who play Tekken, Street Fighter, maybe go to Evo, which is a massive fighting game tournament in Las Vegas. They have largely resisted commodification as an esport, and they're also notable for being one of the most diverse scenes around, from players to spectators. And this is really exemplified in Sonic Fox. So Sonic Fox is a 5 times Evo winner. They are Black and non-binary. They're also a furry. They have this incredible charisma and persona, but they are still currently one of the only people in this space beyond the kind of, especially who is earning a lot of money, who is really kind of pushing back against the kind of typical kind of cis white straight scenario that we're seeing in this space, generally speaking. And so what there really is here is an opportunity to amplify the diverse voices of esports. So an incredible organization which is doing this already is Coexist Gaming. So pictured here are the founders, Sam Israel, and a musician called Letter J. And essentially what this is it's a grassroots collective looking to foster diverse esports talent and provide equal opportunities for growth. So they host daily tournaments for members. They offer a development incubator program for aspiring esports athletes. They have a community for members to just, feel belonging within gaming. And it's a really incredible kind of multifaceted initiative, which is kind of creating a safe space for diverse voices within esports. And so in terms of what brands can do, one of my favorite examples that we found during this research was this collaboration between Absolute and Evil Genius's athlete, Ricky Cortez. So she recently transitioned in an incredibly volatile online environment with a lot of trolling and a lot of hatefulness. And Absolute, as part of their Together IRL campaign, which was all about reconnecting digital communities after the pandemic, really highlighted Ricky Ortiz's story in a really uplifting and exciting way. So amazing example of how brands can get into this space from there. And then secondly, esports stars have more social clout than ever, but the category is still really, really niche in the grand scheme of things. So Lee Trink, who was the CEO of FaZe Clan, says that gamers are the next generation of rock stars. And that is true, but I think that the esports community is also really, really aware of how little people who aren't engaged really know about them. So the G2 and Adidas sponsorship I spoke about before recently released an amazing spot which really, really exemplifies this, which Sofia pointed out for us, called No Clue. This is a still from it. So here, pictured in the spot, this is Ocelot. He is the president of G2. He is a really big deal. If you know anything about esports, you know who this man is. And in the spot, he's depicted as working in a corner shop behind the counter. This girl who loves esports goes in with her boyfriend. The boyfriend doesn't know who he is and kind of makes a comment. And then she comes out and she's like, "You have no clue who that is, do you?" And so the whole joke of the ad is really kind of hinged on this fact that the esports community knows that its leaders and the people who are most exciting in this space are still relatively unknown to the outside world. And so with that in mind, there's a huge opportunity for brands to kind of take the leap with them, to partner with them now to get real cachet with gaming communities before they go too mainstream and it becomes just like the next thing for a brand to jump on. So great example of where a couple of brands have done this. Sports Illustrated putting FaZe Clan on its cover. It did so knowing that many of its readers wouldn't know who they were, and it was a huge success. They were the first esports team to ever be on the cover of Sports Illustrated. And then second, the G2 athlete Reckles, which who Sofia mentioned earlier, partnering with a Ralph Lauren polo for a tennis ad as well. So we're really seeing that these kind of luxury brands are pushing hard to kind of transform esports players into kind of icons in their own right, and really subverting the kind of geeky gamer stereotype at the same time as well. So we have 6 minutes left. I will wrap up very quickly so we can take some questions. The key takeaways are we can meaningfully partner with publishers by legitimizing esports in offline spaces and by serving a more casual gaming audience on mobile. We can credibly participate in leagues and tournaments by creating spaces where grassroots communities can flourish and by investing in joyful esports events beyond the major competitions. We can meaningfully collaborate with teams by treating collaborations like media partnerships and by supporting them in creating healthier environments for players. And finally, we can build credible relationships with players by amplifying the diverse voices of esports and by partnering with these players before they hit the mainstream. So, what you should do next. Before we jump into some questions, it's worth noting that digital media doesn't really get more community-driven than esports. And we are social lives in this world. We are at the fore of this, and we are decoding this culture to really help our brands participate in this in authentic ways. We're moving social marketing forward through the lens of gaming. And so if you'd like to know more about how you can get your brand involved, please do get in touch. And it's also worth noting at this point that we're currently hiring for a number of gaming specialized roles. So if you happen to be watching and you fancy doing a little bit more in this space, also feel free to get in touch with us for that. Fabulous. So let's look into these questions with our final 5 minutes.
Yes, I read a question. So may I ask you why it's important for a brand to support grassroots esports? I can start saying that it's important because starting with a grassroots player could enable fans to create a deeper connection with them, and as they can follow their path upwards the competitive ecosystem. But there are also so many publishers that usually stress the concept that a common player can become an esports star, and there are so many Path to Pro initiatives, and there are also so many interesting trailers of the main competitions like League of Legends Worlds that stress this concept, and it's so interesting.
Nice. Yeah, just to build on that, I think it's really important to kind of note, I guess, that esports was born from grassroots movements. When we spoke to Tiara Taylor, she was talking about how there was almost this kind of aspect of like once gaming became big enough that some of its fans started to become grown-ups, they were like, you know, how do we monetize this? How do we keep this going? How do we find ways to create this? So the whole industry has very much been a self-starting endeavor, and it's rare that you will find people who work in esports who have maybe just fallen into it after the fact. These are all people who really care about gaming, who really love gaming, who really kind of have nostalgic attachments to gaming. And so, you know, they all care very deeply about the community and know that it's the connections that you make with people that are most important, as well as obviously the kind of progression that you can take with it. Fab. Okay, I'm going to shoot one back to you, Sofia. So with a lot of large brands collaborating with gaming platforms, how do smaller brands get their foot in the door? It's a really, really good one. My take on this would be to focus on a community and maybe focus on some of the ones which aren't as much in the limelight. As I mentioned before, there are the fighting game tournaments and some of the communities around those. There are tons of different aspects of esports which focus on all-female teams or you know, charity leagues dedicated to specific causes. There's the rise of mobile games. So I think it's about finding a specific gaming community to focus on if you're a small brand, and maybe not picking, you know, like the League of Legends or the ones which have like that already have these kind of really massive deals attached to them, because the resonance that you'll still make in the long term, especially as it continues to grow, will definitely pay off.
Absolutely agree. There is one more question. Do you think sports fans are skewed more towards APEC than the rest of the world? So Yes, I think that esports were born in APEC, but so there the esports phenomenon is more developed. There are so many big esports arenas, so many teams are more structured there. But the trend now is changing. So in Europe, in the US, or even in South America, there are so many esports teams that are growing up, and so many gaming houses and reality that are making esport to be to enter in the pop culture.
Yeah, definitely. To second that with some numbers, because this was actually one of the myths that we were gonna put in, but we've decided against it. I think in Europe alone, according to Newzoo, which is this incredible kind of data source, there are 96 million active esports viewers. So huge kind of industry, and also something which is. So, for example, one of the biggest stereotypes is that all of the stadiums, or a lot of the kind of current esports stadiums, are in APAC. So there's this real implication that, the diehard fans that go to offline events are there. But actually, I think there was another stat which mentioned that over 3/4 of American fans are really keen to go to a live esports event away from the keyboard, as it were. So yeah, I definitely don't think that it's an APAC specific audience by any means either. Fabulous. So it's 10 here in the UK, and I think that is us. If you have any further questions, or like I say, you want to work here to talk about games, or you would like your brand to engage more actively in esports, please do give us a shout. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Bye.